Hello.
5 years back, if you'd predicted my life would turn out like this, I'd have chuckled and brushed it off as a wild joke. Never would I have bought into it. But here I am, perched at my kitchen table on a calm morning, my mind wandering as I gaze at a coffee mug that's half full. I'm trying to make sense of the last 5 years, piecing together the whirlwind of events, though it's tough to wrap my head around it all. For the last 4 years, it's just been me and my boy, Ethan, holding down the fort. Since the divorce, we've been tackling life as a team of two, like the odds were stacked high against us. I can still picture the day his dad walked out. Ethan was just 6, and he didn't let a single tear fall in my presence. He never does. But I could tell from the way he held himself, quiet and subtle, or the way his eyes lingered out the window, hoping for his dad's return, even if deep down he knew it wasn't happening. Each day, he'd wait, and each day, I'd see the disappointment settle softly on his face when his dad didn't show. The day his father left, I made a vow to myself. I promised I'd do everything in my power to ensure Ethan never felt abandoned. I'd be his rock, the one steady thing in his world, giving him the warmth and safety of a family, even if it was just us two. That promise has been my anchor ever since, pushing me forward even when the days feel impossibly heavy. It's been far from easy, but I've worked hard to build a stable home for him, to shower him with the love and support he needs, no matter what life throws our way. For a long while, I genuinely thought I was holding it all together. Ethan was such a sweet kid, kind, quiet, always pitching in around the house. There was a gentleness to him, something that set him apart from other kids. But as he got older, I noticed changes in him, shifts I couldn't quite pinpoint. And if I'm being real, I could feel myself changing too. This year, Ethan hit 14, a milestone that felt huge for both of us. He's not a little boy anymore, yet sometimes I catch myself thinking he's still teetering on the brink of understanding what growing up really means. The shift isn't always clear, and I can see him grappling with it. He's always been a bit reserved. Even as a young kid, he didn't crave the constant company of others or dive into the noisy, chaotic play his peers loved. He sticks to the quiet of home, not venturing out much. Close friends? He doesn't really have them, not in the way you'd expect for a young guy. I've tried talking to him, probing to see if he's lonely or lost. But every time, he just shrugs and says, "I'm fine." I know my boy better than that, though. He's not fine. A mom can sense these things, even when her kid tries to play it off. About 2 weeks ago, Ethan dropped something on me I never saw coming, something I wasn't ready to hear. It was late, just the two of us in the living room, when he opened up in a way he never had before. He admitted he'd been using my stuff, my underwear. At first, I was lost, my brain scrambling to understand. When it finally clicked, when the weight of his words hit me, it felt like the ground vanished beneath me. My heart pounded, my breath stuck in my throat. I wanted to yell, to ask what in the world he was thinking, how he could think that was okay. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching him. He looked so small, so ashamed, his eyes glued to the floor, his shoulders slumped in a way that broke my heart. The boy who used to be so eager to help, so full of quiet kindness, sat there, weighed down by something I couldn't fully understand. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about what he'd done. It wasn't about the shock or the anger I might have felt. It was about something deeper, something he couldn't put into words, something he was wrestling with inside. This was about his struggle, his confusion, his loneliness, and his fear. All I could do was sit with him, trying to grasp not just what happened, but the quiet, painful feelings he was carrying, ones he didn't yet know how to voice. He wasn't some creep or monster. He was my son, battling urges he didn't understand and couldn't control. I couldn't bear to make him feel worse than he already did. So I made a choice. I struck a deal with him. I told him he could do what he needed, but there'd be boundaries. He could relieve himself, but only with me there, so I could keep him safe and ensure he didn't cross more lines. In return, I said I'd have the freedom to bring whoever I wanted into our home, no questions or judgment from him. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was the best I could come up with in that moment. Since then, things have shifted. Ethan seems calmer, less tense. He's still quiet, but he doesn't shy away from me like before. And me? I'm starting to see that this setup isn't just for him. It's for me too. It's given me a freedom I've longed for, a chance to live my life without feeling like I'm walking on eggshells around him. Sometimes, late at night, I lie awake wondering if I did the right thing. I wonder what folks would say if they knew. Would they call me a terrible mom, a failure? Maybe. But they don't know Ethan. They don't know what it's like to see your kid hurting and not know how to make it better. They don't know what it's like to feel like you're barely keeping it all together, just trying not to fall apart. I haven't got a clue what's in store for Ethan and me down the road. I can't tell if this deal we've struck will hold up for the long haul or if it's just a bomb waiting to blow up in our faces. But for now, this is our world, the choice we've made. It's messy, it's complicated, but I'm giving it my all for him, for both of us. This whole arrangement wasn't something I mapped out or mulled over. It just sort of happened, like a reflex. One second, I was sitting there, scrambling to figure out how to talk to Ethan about what he'd shared, and the next, words were pouring out of me like they had a mind of their own. You can keep going, I told him, but I need something back. His eyes widened, his face drained of color, his hands tightening into fists on the kitchen table. For a moment, I thought he might just get up and leave. Part of me almost hoped he would, maybe I wanted him to call me out, to say I was out of my mind and storm off. But he didn't budge. He just sat there, staring, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words that wouldn't come. What do you mean by that? He finally asked, his voice wobbly, barely above a whisper, like he wasn't sure he wanted to hear my answer. I took a deep breath to steady myself. I mean, you can do what you need to, but only if I'm there. And in return, I get to live my life the way I want. I can have people over, and you don't get to question it or judge me. We both get what we need out of this. A heavy silence followed. Ethan didn't say a thing. He just looked at me, his forehead creased, his lips pressed tight together. I could see him grappling with what I'd said, trying to wrap his head around it. Truth be told, I was doing the same. Those words were out there now, hanging between us like a thick fog, and there was no way to pull them back. Not that I was even sure I wanted to. After what felt like forever, he gave a small nod, so slight I almost missed it. Okay, he murmured, his voice so quiet I had to strain to hear it. If that's what you want. And that was it. That's how the deal came to be. The first time it happened, I thought I might lose my lunch. I was perched on the edge of my bed, my heart racing like a runaway train, my palms slick with sweat. I kept telling myself this was what he needed, that it was better than the alternative, that I was doing this for him. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple, nothing ever is. Ethan came into the room, his eyes locked on the floor. He didn't speak, and neither did I. We didn't even look at each other. I just sat there, pretending it wasn't happening, acting like it was just another day. When it was over, he slipped out without a word. I stayed frozen in place for a long while, staring at the wall, trying to convince myself that everything was okay, that this was okay. It's funny how you can get used to things you never thought you would. At first, every time felt like a punch to the chest, but over time, it started to feel less heavy. Or maybe I just got better at pretending it didn't shake me. I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone, that it was just unconventional. I convinced myself I was being practical, making the best of a tough spot. For a while, I actually bought into that. Ethan, though, was a different case. He tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see it in his eyes, the shame, the guilt eating at him. He never said it outright, but I knew he hated himself for needing this, for needing me in this way. Every time I caught that look on his face, it broke my heart a little more. But what was I supposed to do? He's my son, my only kid. I couldn't just turn away and leave him to sink in his own emotions. So I did what I always do, I put on a brave face and kept moving forward, for him, for us. I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing anymore. Most days, I don't even know what right means. But this is the life we've built, the path we're on. For now, it's enough. It has to be. At the start, things didn't feel all that different. Ethan fell into a sort of pattern, if you can even call it that. Once in the morning, sometimes again at night. It wasn't predictable, but I could manage it. I told myself it was just a phase, that he'd grow out of it, that it'd fade once the newness wore off. But I was wrong. Instead of easing up, it only got more frequent. It started slow, a morning turned into an afternoon, then a night, then 2 mornings in a row. I began to notice how much of our day started circling around this deal. The normal moments, the ones where the house didn't feel weighed down by what we'd agreed to, were getting harder to come by. The first time it really hit me that something was off, I was folding laundry in the living room. Ethan walked in, quiet as always, his face tense, his posture stiff. I knew what he wanted before he even opened his mouth. I set the clothes down and settled on the edge of the couch, waiting for him to finish. But this time was different. When it was done, he didn't just leave. He stayed, lingering there, looking at me like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. My stomach twisted, the weight of that moment pressing down on me like a boulder. "You okay?" I asked, my voice coming out softer than I meant. He nodded, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't just about relief anymore. It was something deeper, something more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in my head over and over. I told myself not to make a big deal out of it, that I was probably imagining things. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just a way for him to cope anymore. It was something he was starting to depend on, something he was leaning into. The worst part? I had no idea how to pull us back from it. In the days that followed, Ethan's behavior took a sharp turn. He stopped bothering to conceal it, no longer waiting for the right moments. It was as if he thought the deal we made gave him a blank check to act however he pleased, whenever he felt like it. And maybe I'd set it up that way, hadn't I handed him that freedom? The first time I teased him, it wasn't on purpose. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot for dinner, when he came in. I could feel his eyes on me, tracking every move I made as I shuffled around. I'm not sure what came over me, maybe I wanted to ease the heavy tension, or maybe I was testing him, curious to see how far he'd push. Without thinking, I shrugged off my jacket, letting it slide onto the counter. I heard his breath catch, and when I turned to him, I let a small, playful smile creep onto my face. "What's the matter?" I asked, acting like I didn't notice the flush creeping up his cheeks. He didn't respond, just spun around and left. But even after he was gone, I could still feel the weight of his stare hanging in the air. After that, it turned into a sort of game. I'd tie my hair up, let my shirt creep up just a bit too far, or leave my jeans unbuttoned a moment longer than necessary. Nothing bold or obvious, just enough to make him fidget, to make him pause before turning away. It gave me a strange sense of power, a control I hadn't felt in years, and I hated how much I enjoyed it. But day by day, the boundaries between us got fuzzier. He started finding reasons to be near me, lingering even when there was no need. And I let him. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. I wasn't sure of anything. One night, things came to a head. Ethan was sitting across from me in the living room, his eyes locked on me while I tried to read a book. The silence was thick, charged with a tension that made my skin tingle and my pulse quicken. I glanced up, meeting his gaze, and for the first time, I didn't look away. Neither did he. The quiet stretched on, heavy and stifling, until I finally cleared my throat and stood. "I'm heading to bed," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, but I could feel his eyes following me as I walked away. I don't know how we ended up here. I don't know how I let things spiral this far. But here we are, trapped in a loop I'm not sure how to escape. And as much as I want to believe I've still got a handle on things, there's a nagging feeling that I've already lost control. Everything started to unravel when Lucas Bennett came into our lives. I met him through a friend, just one of those casual introductions you don't think twice about. But Lucas wasn't someone you could easily brush off. He had this effortless charm, the kind that made you smile without realizing it. His laugh was warm, filling up the room, and he had a way of making me feel lighter, like I could finally let my walls down after years of keeping them up. Lucas started coming around more. At first, it was just for a quick dinner or a drink on the back porch, but soon he was staying later, hanging out in the living room after Ethan had gone to his room. Then one night, he didn't leave. I didn't hide it from Ethan, that wasn't part of our deal, after all. Still, I couldn't miss the look on his face the next morning when he saw Lucas at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like he belonged there. It was subtle, but I know my son. I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his grip on his plate was just a little too firm. At first, Ethan stayed quiet. He just watched from the sidelines, sullen and withdrawn. But as Lucas became a regular presence in our home, Ethan's silence turned into something sharper. He started snapping at me over small things, forgotten chores, a mismatched pair of socks, little annoyances that seemed to grow into something bigger. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself he was just adjusting. But deep down, I could feel the resentment building, heavy and thick, like a storm brewing on the horizon. One evening, while Lucas and I were on the couch, laughing over something silly, Ethan walked in. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there, staring at us with a look I couldn't quite pin down. When I met his eyes, I saw it, hurt, anger, and confusion swirling together, simmering just below the surface. Before I could speak, he broke the silence, his voice low and shaky. "Do you even care anymore?" he said, his words slicing through the room like a blade. Lucas glanced at me, caught off guard, but I kept my eyes on Ethan. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. He took a step closer, his fists clenched. "You don't care about me, about us, about what we're doing, is doing to me." The room went still. Lucas didn't move. I stood up slowly, my chest tight as I searched Ethan's face for answers. "Ethan, that's not true," I said softly. "Of course I care about you." "For me?" he snapped, his voice rising. "How is any of this for me? You let this guy just walk into our lives like it's no big deal. You sit there laughing with him like I'm not even here." His words hit me like a punch, harder than I expected. "Ethan," I said, reaching out, but he stepped back before I could touch him. "I didn't know you felt like this," I said. "Of course you didn't," he shot back, his voice bitter. "You're too caught up in your freedom, or whatever you call it. Do you even see me anymore? Or am I just convenient?" The quiet that settled after Ethan's outburst was overwhelming. Lucas shifted awkwardly on the couch, mumbling something about giving us room before he slipped out the door. I hardly registered his exit. My eyes were locked on my son, trembling with feelings I'd overlooked for too long. That night, after Ethan stormed off to his room, I sat alone in the living room, staring at Lucas's empty coffee mug. Ethan's words echoed in my mind, each one slicing deeper than the last. He was right. I hadn't really been thinking about him. I'd been so caught up in making this whole situation work, convincing myself it was all okay, that I hadn't considered what it was doing to him. For the first time in ages, the weight of my decisions hit me hard, the deal I'd made with Ethan, the lines we'd crossed, the boundaries we'd muddled. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about what we were turning into and the hurt we were leaving behind. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at the door, wondering if there was still a way to make things right or if I'd already missed my chance. The next day, the house felt eerily still. Ethan stayed holed up in his room, the door shut tight, the air thick with tension we hadn't addressed. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the steam rise from my coffee, my thoughts as cloudy as the vapor. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to act. Whatever this thing was between us, whatever we'd let our relationship become, it couldn't continue. Not for him. Not for me. That afternoon, I tapped on his door. No answer at first, but I waited, resting my forehead against the cool wood. "Ethan, please. I need to talk," I said softly. After a moment, the door creaked open. He stood there, his face closed off, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice shaking. "For everything. For not seeing how much this has hurt you, for letting it go this far. I messed up." His expression didn't soften right away, but he stepped aside to let me in. I perched on the edge of his bed while he leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly. "We need help," I admitted. "Both of us. I can't keep acting like I've got this figured out, and I can't let us keep going like this. I've made too many mistakes, but I want to fix them, if you'll give me a chance." Ethan stayed quiet at first, just nodding, his eyes glued to the floor. A few days later, we found ourselves in a small office, sitting across from Samuel Torres, a family therapist I'd found online. Samuel had a calm, steady presence that felt like a safe harbor, even when talking was the last thing we wanted. At first, we were both silent, the weight of our story too heavy to voice. But Samuel had a gift for coaxing words out, asking questions that felt like gentle nudges rather than prods. Slowly, Ethan started to share. He spoke about the loneliness he'd carried since the divorce, the confusion our deal had stirred, and the resentment that had been simmering inside him. I listened, tears streaming down my cheeks as he gave voice to feelings I'd ignored for far too long. Therapy became part of our routine in the weeks that followed. It wasn't easy. Some days, we left the office more drained than when we arrived, and I wondered if we were getting anywhere. But little by little, the walls between us started to crumble. Samuel helped us set real boundaries this time. I told Ethan our deal was done, that it was a mistake, and we needed a fresh start. At first, he struggled to adjust. I'd catch him slipping into old patterns, his frustration spilling out as anger or tears. But with Samuel's guidance, we found better ways to cope. Ethan started journaling, something he never thought he'd do, and joined a local martial arts class, which gave him a way to channel his emotions. Bit by bit, I saw him change. He carried himself taller, spoke with a bit more confidence, and started spending time outside the house, building connections that didn't revolve around me. For me, the toughest part was looking in the mirror, really looking. Therapy forced me to face the choices I'd made, how I'd let my fears and insecurities shape my relationship with Ethan. I'd clung to him so tightly, trying to fill the hole left by the divorce, that I hadn't seen how it was choking us both. Letting go of that control, trusting he could stand on his own, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. One evening, 3 months after our first session, Ethan and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink below the horizon. He glanced at me and said, "Thanks, Mom. For everything." It wasn't a big speech, but it meant the world. I reached over and squeezed his hand, a quiet gesture that said more than words could. We're still working things out. Healing's not a straight path, it's messy, tangled, and full of stumbles. But for the first time in forever, I feel a spark of hope. Ethan's finding his way, and so am I. We can't erase the mistakes we've made, but we're learning how to move forward together. Life doesn't come with a guidebook, and if it did, I'd probably have tossed it out years ago. Ethan and I have been through more than I ever thought we could handle, but we're still here, still trying, still growing. The house feels different now, lighter, like the air's not so heavy anymore. Maybe there's a kind of peace in knowing we're working towards something better. Ethan's finding his stride. He's out with friends more, chasing his own interests. When we cross paths, it feels like we're meeting as two people, not as a mom and son tangled up in a confusing mess we didn't fully get. We still have our rough patches, nobody's perfect, but it's progress, and that's something. For me, this whole journey has been about looking in the mirror and facing who I am. I've had to learn to let go of the guilt that's been dragging me down for so long, to forgive myself for the mistakes I've made. I've come to realize I can't fix everything, and sometimes the best way to love someone is to step back and let them find their own path. It's been tough, but I'm proud of how far we've come, not just as a mom and her son, but as two people rediscovering how to trust and respect each other. If I've learned anything from this mess, it's how much boundaries matter, real, meaningful ones. They're not just rules to follow, they're a way to show love. Love for the people in your life and love for yourself. They're how you keep what's important safe while still leaving space for growth, for understanding, for real connection. I've figured out that owning up to your mistakes is just as crucial as forgiving yourself, and sometimes the hardest thing is admitting you got it wrong. But let me tell you, it's also the most liberating. If anyone's out there listening, here's what I want you to know: your mistakes don't make you who you are. It's what you do next that counts, how you dust yourself off, how you face the people you've let down, and how you keep going. Growing isn't about being flawless, it's about being brave enough to change, even when it's scary, even when it stings. Ethan and I are still working through things, and I reckon we always will be. That's just how life goes. But for the first time in forever, I feel like we're standing on steady ground. We're building something stronger, something healthier. And I know we'll keep moving forward, side by side.
Bye-bye.